Let's explore the Handbook to Literary Research edited by Delia de Souza Correa and W.R. Owens. If you're a postgraduate student or an independent researcher stepping into literary studies, this book works like a friendly guidebook. It takes you from the basics such as how to find sources all the way to planning and writing a dissertation. The handbook begins by walking you through essential resources, research techniques, and the practices scholars use every day. Each chapter highlights important texts, explains key ideas, and ends with exercises so readers can test their skills. The editors keep returning to one main point: independence. Now let's go chapter by chapter in simple terms. Chapter 2, written by Shafqat Tauheed, focuses on tools and techniques. The idea is very practical. Start by surveying what's available online, then move to your university library, and finally visit major research libraries for materials you can't find elsewhere. This hierarchy has been asked in exam, so remember the order. The chapter teaches skills like how to compare online sources, how to use digital databases wisely, how to locate archives, and even how to keep up with research networks. Chapter 3 by Simon Elliott introduces the 4 main types of bibliography: descriptive, analytical, enumerative, and historical. This classification has been asked in exam. The chapter explains how bibliography helps map the field of study, locate editions, and support textual arguments. In chapter 4, also by Elliott, we move into the history of the book. Here you learn how books are printed, published, circulated, and read. You also explore paratexts like prefaces and illustrations and how books operate as cultural objects. This helps you see how publishing history and readership shape the way a text is interpreted. Chapter 5, written by W.R. Owens, is about editing literary texts. If you've ever wondered how a critical edition is produced, this chapter answers it. It explains textual criticism, variance, authorial intention, collation, transcription, and editorial responsibility. It also gives advice for researchers on how to use scholarly editions effectively. Then we move to chapter 6 by Suman Gupta, which explains the institutional histories of literary disciplines. It shows how subjects like English, comparative literature, and world literature took shape inside universities, and how curriculum, canon formation, and academic politics influence what we study and how we study it. Knowing this helps you understand why certain texts are valued and why certain methods dominate. In chapter 7, also by Gupta, you learn about the place of theory in literary research. Theory is not an optional extra. It shapes your research questions, your evidence, and your argument. The chapter explains major frameworks like structuralism, Marxism, feminism, post-colonialism, post-structuralism, and others. It also teaches you how to choose and justify your theoretical lens. Chapter 8 by David Johnson introduces interdisciplinarity. This means working across subjects using history, sociology, music, film studies, linguistics, or political theory alongside literature. The chapter shows how interdisciplinary work enriches analysis but also warns about the challenges of mixing methods. In chapter 9, Correa and others explore literature's relationship with other media, film, performance, art, and sound. They discuss adaptation, multimedia texts, and how literature interacts with visual and auditory forms. You also get pointers to archives and media repositories. Chapter 10 by Susan Bassnett is about literary research and translation. It covers cultural transfer, the translator's visibility, equivalence, and comparative strategies. This chapter helps you understand how translated texts function and how to analyze them critically. Chapter 11, again by Owens, becomes a hands-on manual for writing a dissertation or thesis. It covers everything: choosing a topic, planning chapters, making a research design, taking notes, referencing, ethics, drafting, revision, and preparing for your viva. The chapter stresses clarity, rigor, and originality, not in the sense of discovering brand new facts, but in offering fresh interpretations. It also highlights practical points that have been asked in exam, such as keeping accurate bibliographic details, building chapter plans, maintaining a realistic timetable, and using peer and supervisor feedback wisely. Next, Chapter 12 provides a glossary. It's a compact dictionary of research terms and critical theory keywords, perfect for quick reference while writing or preparing for exams. Finally, Chapter 13 by M.A. Katritsky gives you a checklist of major libraries, printed reference works, bibliographies, and essential online resources like JSTOR, MLAB, Project Muse, LION, and National Digital Archives. When you begin literary research, one of the most important things to learn is how to use sources wisely. Good research isn't just about reading more. It's about knowing where to look, how to evaluate sources, and how to stay connected with the larger research community. Let's walk through this in a simple, conversational way. We start with something basic but powerful. Having an overview of the main online and printed sources related to your topic. Before you begin writing or analyzing anything, you should know what kind of material is out there. This includes digital databases, research articles, books, and reference works. As you explore these resources, you also learn how to evaluate them, comparing what different websites, journals, and archives offer. With time, you start becoming more confident in using these online tools. You learn how to identify, evaluate, and retrieve the exact materials you need, whether they are primary texts or scholarly articles. These same sources also help you locate archives, which hold manuscripts, letters, and historical materials. And by participating in online networks, forums, academic groups, research platforms, you gradually become part of a wider research community. This helps you stay updated with new work and recent developments in your subject area. Now, let's talk about preparation, which is absolutely essential for effective research. Before stepping into a library, always begin by checking what is already available online. Many journals, books, and reference materials can be accessed instantly from your home or your institution's website. This early step saves time and helps you plan your remaining work efficiently. Researchers recommend creating a hierarchy for your research preparation. The first step is to identify what you can access digitally. This includes public databases as well as resources offered through your institution. Once you've explored these, your next stop is your own university library, either in person or through its online portal. Get to know its digital catalogs, ebooks, journals, and print collections. If something you need is still unavailable, then move to the third step, locating the nearest major research library. This might be a national library or a large research institution. Before visiting, list the specific books, articles, or archival materials you need. Planning in advance helps you use your library time effectively. A very similar idea appears in the steps of material collection, and a few of these steps have been asked in exam. The first step is to check what is available online, including both open access websites and your institution's digital collections. The second step is exploring your university library, which gives you access to both physical and electronic holdings. The third step is identifying a major research library where you can find material not available elsewhere. And finally, whenever you plan to visit such a library, prepare in advance by noting down the exact sources you want to consult. This prevents wasted time and makes your research more efficient. Now let's shift to bibliography, a word you've probably heard many times. But in literary research, bibliography is much more than a simple list of books. It is a detailed, systematic study of books as physical objects and as carriers of texts. Bibliography helps you understand what editions exist, how texts have changed over time, and how they have circulated in society. Simon Elliott describes four main types of bibliography. The first is descriptive bibliography, which records the physical features of a book, its binding, paper, format, and typography. The second is analytical bibliography, which goes deeper by studying how the book was produced, printed, and transmitted. This includes identifying printing errors and tracking variations between copies. The third type is enumerative bibliography, which compiles organized lists of works arranged by author, subject, or period. The fourth is historical bibliography, which studies the larger world of books, publishing, circulation, readership, and the cultural life surrounding texts. Each type of bibliography serves a different purpose, but together they allow researchers to navigate the complex world of editions, printing histories, and textual changes. Without bibliographical work, it becomes difficult to establish authoritative editions or support claims in textual criticism. Let's begin with a very practical and important idea in literary research: bibliography. Even though the word may sound like a simple list of books, Simon Elliott reminds us that bibliography is much more than that. It is a key tool for researchers because it helps us understand books not only as texts, but also as physical objects that have their own history and journey. Bibliography helps us answer questions like: what versions of a text exist? How were they produced? How did they circulate? That information becomes the foundation for editing, textual scholarship, and even literary history. Without bibliographical work, it becomes very hard to know which edition of a book is reliable or how a text has changed over time. Simon Elliott identifies four types of bibliography, and each serves a different purpose. The first is descriptive bibliography, which focuses on the book's physical features, the binding, the paper, the typography, the format. Think of it like a neat and careful description of how the book looks and feels. The second type is analytical bibliography, which goes much deeper. Instead of just describing the book, it investigates how it was made. Scholars look at the printing process, the typesetting, the errors, and the variations between copies. This helps them figure out how the text traveled from one version to another. Analytical bibliography is especially helpful when we want to understand the production history of a book. The third type is enumerative bibliography, and this is the one most students are familiar with. It simply lists works in a systematic way, maybe by author, subject, or date. If you've ever searched for books on modernism or women poets of the 19th century, you've used an enumerative bibliography. Finally, we have historical bibliography, which looks at the bigger picture. This approach studies how books fit into society, how they were published, how they circulated, and what kinds of readers they reached. It reminds us that books do not live alone. They exist within cultural and social systems. Now let's shift to another practical area: planning, writing, and presenting a dissertation or thesis based on the guidance of W.R. Owens. If you are doing an MA, your dissertation usually falls between 10,000 and 20,000 words. A PhD, on the other hand, is much longer, typically between 70,000 and 100,000 words. The first step is choosing a topic. This can be difficult because literature gives you so many possibilities. Owens suggests beginning by listing 5 or 6 areas you care about. Then, read selectively around those areas to see what studies already exist, what approaches have been used, and where the gaps might be. A good topic must be narrow, focused, and manageable. Something broad like narrative technique in the 18th century novel is far too large. But a specific topic such as parallel narration in Richardson's novels or Tennyson and the Education of Women gives you a clear direction. Interestingly, less explored authors or topics can also make excellent dissertations as long as materials are available. To guide yourself, ask simple questions. What are the key studies? What approaches have scholars used? What are the main debates? And is there a gap I can explore? Once you have your topic, the next big step is turning that topic into an argument. And this ability has been asked in exam. A dissertation isn't just a collection of information, it needs to argue something. Maybe you are supporting or challenging a critic. Maybe you are showing the influence of one writer on another. Perhaps you are introducing a new theory to an old text or highlighting the value of a neglected author. You might even compare a major work with a lesser known one. Framing your topic as an argument keeps you focused and gives your writing structure. Then comes working out the structure of your dissertation. Owens tells us that structure depends heavily on word limit. A 15,000 word MA dissertation usually has 3 or 4 chapters of around 3 to 4,000 words each, plus an introduction and a conclusion of about 1,500 words each. A PhD of 80,000 words may have 7 or 8 chapters, each 8 to 10,000 words long, with a longer introduction and conclusion. Whatever the level, the structure must include 3 essential parts. You need an introduction that explains your aims. You need a main body where you build your argument with evidence. And finally, a conclusion that reflects on what your research achieved and how it might be extended further. As research grows, the structure may shift a little, but its purpose stays the same: to present your argument clearly and logically, guiding your reader through each step. Once you've chosen a focused and manageable research topic, the next big step is preparing a research proposal. Think of this proposal as your project's roadmap, but also as a convincing argument showing that your research is not only interesting, but also realistic. For an MA student, this proposal is usually short, around 1,000 words, and it needs to be written in clear, continuous prose under simple headings. You begin with a title. This doesn't have to be perfect, because it may change later, but it should clearly tell the reader what your project is about. Next, you write a brief argument explaining the central idea or question your dissertation will explore. This helps your supervisor understand what you want to prove or investigate. Then comes the material section. Here, you explain which primary texts you'll study: novels, poems, letters, and which secondary sources will support your argument. You also explain why these materials matter. After that, you add chapters, which is basically a rough outline of your structure. Even though these chapters may change later, it helps you show how your argument will unfold. A short conclusion comes next, describing the direction you expect your argument to grow in and any challenges you might face. Finally, your proposal ends with a bibliography, a provisional list of texts you'll be working with. A PhD proposal works in the same way, but it is longer, usually between 2,000 and 3,000 words, and it must show something more: originality. A doctoral student has to prove that their research will add something genuinely new to the field. This might mean studying unknown manuscripts, exploring neglected texts, discovering new archival materials, or developing a fresh theoretical argument. At this level, you must show independence as a researcher, familiarity with existing scholarship, and clarity about how your work will extend or challenge what has already been written. Once your research proposal is approved, you enter the real world of dissertation writing. This stage needs patience, planning, and consistency. A good starting point is to create a timetable with your supervisor. Plan your library visits and interlibrary loans in advance. Everything, every chapter, every search, every revision will take longer than you expect, so give yourself more time than you think you'll need. Start building your bibliography early. Use organized notes or a bibliographic software tool, and always save your work in multiple places. Keep track of new publications in your field through abstracts, indexes, and current journals. And here's an important habit: write as you research. Don't wait until everything is perfect. Drafting early helps shape your ideas and prevents last-minute stress. Use correct scholarly conventions from the beginning. This includes proper citations, accurate quotations, and a clear writing style that avoids unnecessary jargon. Your dissertation must present an argument, not a pile of notes. Every claim needs evidence, and every idea should flow logically into the next. Don't forget to address counter-arguments. Showing that you have considered other perspectives will strengthen your own position. When you reach the end, you will almost certainly have written too much. That's normal. The final stage is about revision cutting. What isn't essential? Sharpening your introduction, tightening your conclusion, and making sure everything is clear, coherent, and well supported. Now let's turn to some practical exercises that help you build strong research skills. Start with searching bibliographies and reference works. Learn how to evaluate library catalogs and compare the helpfulness of different reference sources in your field. Next, practice surveying the field. Read abstracts, skim introductions, compare different critics on the same author, and summarize debates in your own words. This helps you see how scholars talk to each other. Then comes planning research. Try drafting small proposals with clear objectives, methods, and limits. Practice shaping a research question into an argument and revising your plan until it becomes realistic and focused. You also need strong skills in locating materials. Search online and printed catalogs, plan library visits using guides and finding aids, and learn to judge the usefulness of primary materials versus secondary ones. When using materials, practice editing your notes, summarizing arguments accurately, and paraphrasing without losing meaning. Learn to evaluate secondary scholarship critically, not passively. Finally, move into writing up your ideas. Draft chapter outlines, practice weaving quotations into your analysis, and revisit your writing for clarity, coherence, and proper referencing. Once you've completed all your research and writing, the final stage is presenting your dissertation or thesis. This step may feel technical, but it is crucial. A well-presented dissertation shows professionalism, attention to detail, and respect for academic standards. So let's walk through it. The first thing to remember is that every university has its own rules. These rules cover everything from formatting and referencing to how and when you submit your work. Before you start polishing your final draft, check the guidelines carefully. Look for requirements about margins, spacing, bibliography layout, and even the preferred style of citation. Following these rules makes the evaluation process easier and ensures your work fits institutional expectations. Let's now talk about the text format, because presentation really does matter. Universities usually expect your dissertation to be printed on good quality white paper, preferably on one side only. The main body of the text should be double-spaced, which makes it easier to read and annotate. Footnotes, inset quotations, and the bibliography are normally single-spaced with a little extra line spacing between items in the bibliography. Margins also play an important role. The inside margin is kept wide around 40 millimeters, so the binding does not swallow your text. The top and outside margins are usually about 15 millimeters, and the bottom margin is around 20 millimeters. For the font, the standard choice is Times New Roman, around size 12. You can use italics for book titles, foreign words, or anything that needs emphasis. Paragraph layout must be consistent. Normally, the first paragraph of each chapter begins flush left. The paragraphs that follow can either have an indented first line with no extra spacing, or they can be aligned left with a blank line between them. Choose one method and stick to it throughout. Page numbers must run continuously, and every chapter should begin on a new page. Chapter titles are usually centered and in capital letters. Section headings, on the other hand, are often placed flush left and in italics. Make sure to include a table of contents with accurate page numbers, since this is the first thing your reader will use to navigate your work. Before submitting, give the entire dissertation a slow and careful proofread. Check spelling, grammar, punctuation, and most importantly, quotations. Every quotation must be copied exactly from the original. This step may feel tedious, but it can prevent major mistakes. Now, let's move to referencing and citations. These not only show your academic honesty, they also allow readers to trace your ideas back to the sources. You must cite a source whenever you quote it directly, paraphrase it, refer to it in your argument, or depend heavily on another scholar's ideas. Cross-referencing is also expected when a related source supports your point. Above all, your citations must be complete and accurate. A missing page number or an incomplete title can weaken the credibility of your work. There are two main referencing systems you are likely to use. The first is the running notes or numerical system, often associated with MHRA. In this system, you place a small superscript number in the text and the corresponding reference appears in a footnote. Footnotes in this style give the full reference. They should not be used to add long explanations. If you have extra material, an appendix is more suitable. The second is the author page system, commonly known as MLA. Here, citations appear inside the text, usually with the author's last name followed by the page number. These citations correspond to a works cited list at the end. This system is similar to the Harvard author date approach, but the date is less central because the humanities focus more on interpretation than chronology. Both systems are widely accepted in literary studies. The important thing is to choose one, follow it consistently, and match all entries correctly. Once you understand these guidelines, presenting your dissertation becomes much easier. Think of this stage as giving your research the professional appearance it deserves after months of hard work. A clear, clean, well-structured document reflects the clarity of your thinking, and it always makes a strong impression on examiners.